Welcome to Let's Talk Church and Other Things. I am your host, Shirla.
And I'm Corey.
And today our guest is Sok. Hi, Sok. Welcome to the show.
What's up? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good. Yeah. So Sok or Sokeo, Ross. I'll give my things on names in a little bit. Um, I am the director of the Center at Moore Hall in Providence College, and also director of the Providence College Smith Hill Annex. So if you ever need like community space or whatever it is, I offer it free to the community. So I'm newly director to that. Also professor of trauma-informed education for an urban teaching program and civic engagement and community in the arts in spring. Also a professor of College Unbound, which is a college that I'm super cool with, that I graduated from. So a lot of titles, but those things mean a lot to me because didn't feel like I've ever was going to make it to this point in life. You know what I mean? So with everything that has been around and all the injustices and so forth, it's like this impossibility became more of an I'm possible, right? So
You're going to have to keep talking in your mic because anytime you move.
it goes away.
that
Got you.
one
I got
goes-
you.
Yeah, it
yeah.
goes away.
I hope you heard all that because I want to say it again.
No, it was only, and I remember my other son told me that mic, because when he listens back to the shows, that one, if they move a certain way, it,
Got you. Focus here.
yeah.
I'm cool with it.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
Nope.
So where am I going with?
You can pick up where you left.
Yeah. So, like I was telling y'all earlier, I'm not from here. Refugee camp, the Khmer Rouge, the genocide. So my family are survivors of that. So I am a refugee. Born there in '80, came here around '83 to California for a few nights in Iowa. Then in '86 to Rhode Island, moved into the West End, Hanover Street. Lived there for about 11, 12 years, and the majority of that life. What was normalized for me was, although never in a gang affiliated, first floor members were gang members. That's all I knew. Most of my friends were in gangs or had older brothers or sisters that were in gangs. So that's the life I grew up in, right? You're looking at the lemonade truck that sold drugs. There's a plastic factory down the street, so that's all you're breathing. You can't smell the Dominican, Puerto Rican, Nigerian food, Cambodian food, nothing like that until the factories are closed at night. And then liquor stores around the corner, off of Cranston Street. One of the house that had a lot of activity going on back and forth. Mind you, I was 6 years old, 11, 12 years old, going to Bridget Middle School, a semester, same thing. So that was all I saw, right? And then Classical High School I was 15, 16. Didn't really like Classical High School. I was uncomfortable. So because of that, some friends of mine started breaking and, they were the same familiarities in terms of like gang members and so forth. Became a hobby. At the age of 16, I went to Carriage House. If y'all know about the Carriage House, now called Everett Company Stage and School. I went to an open breakdance class, and the director, Dorothy Jungles, was like, "You want to do a show?" Nah, I was shy back then. Couldn't talk for nothing, and she asked me like a few other questions. You get free pizza or McDonald's after the show. You get $15 to $20 after the show. And I still was like, I was too shy for that joint. And I was afraid of my parents. So I didn't want to, do anything to get them angry.
Mm-hmm.
But she was like, most of the shows are during school, so you're probably going to miss school. So I said, yep, sign me up. But because I was afraid of my parents, I forged my papers, gave it to them, did it myself. And not for nothing, breaking, hip hop, the arts, dance was something that saved my life. If not, I'd be dead or in jail. Classical High School wasn't it for me. I went back and reverted to hanging out with friends and family and people that I knew that I was comfortable with, from similar hoods. So I got back into that. Didn't graduate high school until some months later. Had to take some extra classes. Because of that, I got kicked out of Rhode Island College because I didn't graduate high school. Went to CCRI, did a full 2 years. If y'all know, it's a 2-year school. Did a 2 full, failed out. And then I was, bump this. So I started to just, at the age of 19, I went on tour nationally with Everett Company Stage and School. And I was like, this is what I love to do. I love to dance. I love to meet different communities, especially communities that were similar to mine. Talk with the youth, speak with the youth. So I've done shows, about 5 national tours, 1 solo show. The age 2007 came. I was like, I'm older now. Let me see if I can give it another chance to go back to school. I went to Rhode Island College. the place that didn't want me in the first place. But again, I was, I'm a little bit older, but I didn't know my traumas. Didn't understand my traumas. Didn't understand mental health and how that affected me in my education. I did another 2 full years, changed my major 3 times, failed out again. 2009, again, full-fledged artist. 2013 came. And with all of these years I've been teaching, working with youth, working in schools, public schools here, all over. Even on tour, I worked at universities, taught at universities, but some was still missing. College Unbound came, my homegirl Min, she was like, yo, you know about this place called College Unbound? I was like, nah. So Min was like, yeah, you try it out. I didn't go back in until 2014, ish. But other than that, it was, I didn't get my bachelor's until summer of 2014. Mm-hmm. I was 34 years old then, right? Wow. So that was the first time I got like a side hug from my father. First time we took a family portrait together at that age. Because we didn't celebrate I love yous, we didn't say that stuff. We didn't have birthdays, holidays, or any of those things. So I grew up kind of like desensitized to those kinds of things. But man, it was a dope ass moment. It was super dope. Kept touring, and then my life just started even flourishing. I did the TED Talk, I did city tours, did my own solo show. I'm still doing excerpts of my solo show till this day. Mm-hmm. And then 2018, 2017, I was like, you know what? Let me go for my master's. And then I got into Providence College because of the work I've done with community for the number of years. I got a graduate assistantship, so I hustled that and hustled teaching and stuff. So I went for free. Got my master's in 2020 during COVID, the height of COVID at that. So I graduated on TV. You know what I mean? So like the president of the college was recorded view, so I took pictures like that with me with the TV. Then I became the manager of the place that I graduated from at Providence College, and now I'm the director of that space. And I am now pursuing my doctorates in higher education.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, so all of these things to say that academics wasn't it for me until I needed something, and dance was it. Hip-hop was it, the arts was it. And I know I saw my homegirl, Angel Newman, here a little while back, and I've known her since she was like 13, 14 years old. And she's also a professor at College Unbound, also worked for me as a graduate assistant at Providence College, and now, of course, co-executive director at ASU 20. So, and that's how the community works, right? We work with each other, we help each other, we do the things, and that's what worked for me. What didn't work for me was not knowing my mental health and the traumas that affected me, and that's what led me into working and learning more about that with youth currently.
Okay, so before we get into that, because that is the gist of the episode, I want to go back a little. You indicated that, basically you didn't want to tell your parents about the dancing.
Right.
So when did they find out?
Man, listen, they found out through the grapevine, like later on, because they blamed dancing for my failures in school.
Not realizing it was saving your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, because they didn't understand their own traumas. You're looking at them losing family members, brothers and sisters. I have six brothers and sisters before me that I've never met. And they all passed away due to starvation, war, disease, so on and so forth. So I'm the first surviving child. And my last name, if you say Ross, but pronounced in Khmer is Ro, which means to live, to survive, and to be alive. Wow. So I take that heavily. And, they found out through the grapevine. They hated it. I was like the biggest disappointment for a long time. And that hurt me because I'm like, I'm sitting there doing something I love, but how am I supposed to show that if I didn't learn how to do it?
Right.
You feel me?
Right.
So
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that a lot of your family and friends was in gangs.
Yep.
How did you dodge that? You didn't feel the peer pressure to fit in with them?
No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how'd you dodge that? Like
dance. Dance was my outlet. Dance was my escape. Dance was my everything. Some of them were still doing it, breaking and so on and so forth, but others, you lost friends to lost their lives, incarcerated, so on and so forth. But for me, dance was the only thing because I was very shy. So dance was the only way that I could speak. And that's how I did it. I moved that way. So that was my movement language. Only way I could talk to people. So if you asked me a question when I was younger or asked me to talk, You may get a peep out of me. That's basically it. But if you put on some music, dance floor, I'm in there, right? As if I was not shy at all.
I know, because I'm going to say shy people usually don't dance.
Right,
I was
right.
gonna say, how did you even get introduced to dancing?
My homeboys, friends, they were breaking. I'm like, yo, that looks pretty dope. So I started trying it. So we're pretty much self-taught. Beat Street, all of those movies that was on VHS.
Yeah.
Back then, you had you were able to rewind it
Yeah.
and then put it in slow mo. So I try to copy all the steps in that way in my bedroom or in the living room, secretly, because my parents didn't want me to do that because it's a waste of time. It's not wasting your time. Read, do school books. Because for them, that's the way out. Education is the way out.
Facts.
Once you get a college degree, you made it in life, not knowing that the college degree doesn't solve everything.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So, but
Right.
for me, dance was my step into the door, into opportunities, into understanding who I am and my mental health, which was a huge gateway for me to work with community.
Got it. So we are here to talk about the mental health with children, and we know that is not your profession, but you've been through some stuff and you've helped a lot.
Yeah.
So let's get into that by asking, tell us a little about, because as you were talking later on down the line, you realized that it was your own childhood trauma that kind of like, I guess it was like a curse and a blessing, because it kind of like, I don't know, discouraged you from doing some things. You didn't communicate well via mouth, but
Right.
you did via dance. But then you also found a way to communicate via dance. So the trauma for you, not that everybody has that outcome, but for you it was like a curse and a blessing, because look at you now. You went through the trauma, whatever it was that you're going to tell us, but you had some setbacks, but in the midst of all of that, you found an outlet. And not only did you find an outlet, you began to mature enough to be able to go to college and get your degree and get your master's and be a director and sitting here sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sounds great when you say it. It took a while to get here. And from most kids from BIPOC and historically marginalized communities don't understand what their traumas are, right? Because this is every day for us. Every day for us. Drive-bys, cool. Like my neighborhood, drive-bys all the time. There was bullet holes in the windows. Like I told you, the lemonade truck sold drugs. We didn't have toys, so we played with like tires. The lot next door was empty, so there were empty tires, a old boat that someone blew up, set on fire. Once that died down, we played with what was left, right? We played with the remains of what people threw away. But that's the beauty of creation, the beauty of hip hop. Like hip hop has so many limitations, restrictions. You're looking at South Bronx. Okay, cool. We got some turntables. We got these things. We got community. That was the biggest thing, having that kind of community. And for me, the community was the dance community. So dance was the only way I started the healing process, and without even knowing it. Because as children of historically marginalized communities, we work with what we have. But because of that, we think this is normal. Now this is good, cool. This is an everyday thing. It ain't nothing, right? And my parents survived genocide. Gang life, West End, it ain't nothing. It ain't nothing. It's another day, so go on, do your school thing. I didn't know how to do that. And now working with youth, I see the same things. Still to this day, right? Of course, it's prevalent in our communities and so forth. And there's different traumas in different areas. When kids get a chance to actually acknowledge the fact that they're going through something, feel that, and able to cry, smile, talk about it, that's when it starts the healing process, when you actually understand certain things. But they're not going to understand it if there's no kind of outlet to do so.
Right.
So because of that, I worked with incarcerated youth in the DYS system for about 5 years. And then with the CBITS, Cognitive Behavioral Intervention Trauma in Schools, for about another 4 years or so. And with Everett Company and CYC Providence. So we wanted to make sure that there was an outlet, a program in schools that addresses this, because, you're not going to be able to learn if you don't understand what you're feeling inside.
Right.
And you're always going to hold that inside because, quote unquote, you need to man up. You're told to set your problems aside. Don't even talk about it. There's other things to worry about. And I'm hearing stories from children of that watching a family member overdose, or seeing someone get stabbed in the woods, or a drive-by similar to what I've been or have gone through.
Mhm.
That's why the rapport is built so naturally with our storytelling, and that's why I believe in storytelling as a part of a healing mechanism.
Mhm.
I mean, for all of us, really.
And that's what I think that the children always get lost in the equation.
Mhm.
Like they just expect a child to be able to handle situations as you stated, overdose
A
or
child, sometimes an adult can't handle that situation.
right.
Mhm.
But as adults, they expect the children to just be able to, oh yeah, you saw that, it happened, let's go. Yeah, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. You're good. Instead of going back asking, okay, let's sit down and talk. First of all, we all need to go to counseling because we all done went through something.
Right.
I can't help my child if I can't help myself.
Right.
Facts.
And, for the African American community, we have a tendency to just push things under the rug like they never happened. And I can say that because even 2016, when my youngest sister passed away, and I was given the job to do whatever I needed to do to be able to get her body back here in Rhode Island so we could have a viewing. No, 7 days I had to deal with her husband at the time. And everything was questionable regarding her death to this day. And this was in 2016. None of my family members have approached me to say, Sherla, are you okay? Because they will never know. Those conversations that I had to have with him were traumatizing. I had to watch him go from this mood swing to that mood swing to that mood swing. But in the midst of it all, I had to remember that, but my family is relying on me. So I can't go back at him. I can't say what I really feel. I can't go to them and say, I'm done, because they're relying on me. So I know what kind of impact that had on me as an adult. So imagine a child experiencing trauma and an adult saying to them, "Oh, you're going to be okay." Well, you take the word of the adults. You take the word of your parents. So, okay, if mom and dad say I'm going to be okay, but I can't sleep at night. But mom and dad said I'm going to be okay, but I can't even focus in school because all I can think about is what I saw.
Right.
It's, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that fell on you, but I'm gonna leave that alone.
And I just said that to share my point of view as an adult.
Right.
So because you had said, even some adults can't even handle
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I had a situation in 2012, and I was in a real dark place. Me and my son had gotten into a fist fight, and it broke my heart. You know what I mean? Because we was fighting like we didn't even know each other.
Right.
And I never forget it. And then 2 weeks later, my dad passed. So I'm dealing with me and my son fighting, and then my dad passed, me and my son not speaking, me out of the house. It was just a lot. I wasn't sleeping, and I was in a real dark place that I didn't even know who I was anymore.
Right.
And I got real depressed. And I couldn't sleep. I was eating junk, and I was just doing things that I normally wouldn't do, and I'm gonna leave it like that, because I couldn't deal with it. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought of that fight that I had with my son, because you never want to go there with your child. You know what I mean?
Right.
And and I had to talk to someone, because if I didn't, I was gonna lose my mind. And it was tough for me. I went to go see someone. A friend of mine at work said, Corey, you should talk to someone. Like, you need to talk to someone. You can't talk to someone you know. You need to find someone and just vent and let it all out. And it helped me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It really did. So sometimes you talk about kids can't deal with it. Adults can't deal with it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And me and my son tried to talk about it not too long ago, and we both got emotional about the situation. We've never even spoke about it. He never said he was sorry. I never said I was sorry, because it's just a moment that we kind of like sweep under the rug because it was bad. It was bad. And we're talking what? This is what, 22? We're talking what, 12 years ago? And I still think about it because you never want to fight with your son, you know what I mean? And I was in a bad, bad dark spot.
And you said, I mean, and I appreciate both of y'all telling your stories. And that's the beauty of storytelling, right? And a part of the healing. So one of the things that you said that was amazing was, imagine, children that aren't able to deal with it, but imagine adults that aren't able to deal with it. Adults aren't able to deal with it because they never dealt with it when they were children, because they're not allowed to, because you're supposed to grow up, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. And in our communities, quote unquote, you don't talk about your problems. You don't deal with it. Grow up, so on and so. So you've been ingrained into listening to this the whole time. So as you get older, you're almost desensitized in terms of your emotions. Now imagine if our children, or if we as children, were able to talk about or address our emotions, what we're feeling, and so on and so forth. This would have mitigated what may have happened later on in the future. Or at least we would have some ideas and strategies on how to deal with it and how to cope with it and how to work with it. Instead of every time there's a death, that's when community comes together. Or that's when the family comes back together. It shouldn't take death to bring people together.
Exactly.
Right? Now, when I said the young folks that I've been working with are going through things like murders and overdose and stuff like that, and I'm hearing stories from them, it's heartbreaking because they're told the same things that I was told when I was younger in terms of like, don't tell people this. Don't talk to nobody. Nope. And there's also fears too of the system. If you tell folks, they'll be like, oh, the parents will be like, oh, I'm scared that my children might get taken away, or so on and so forth, or am I unfit as a parent? And these are the narratives that have been given to us by society, not by ourselves, right? How many times you heard of the at-risk youth, the problem child, and so on and so forth? I didn't give them that name.
Right.
They didn't give themselves that name, right? So, and then if you're going to keep calling me a bad kid, I'm going to show you what a bad kid looks like, right? So that we have to target the foundations of what caused the trauma in the first place before giving any kind of med, right? So when you get a cut, you can't just put a Band-Aid on it. How'd you get that cut? So we want to see if there's an infection,
Right.
and so on and so forth. What is infecting us in terms of our trauma?
Gotta know how to treat it.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
You're good. BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, acronyms of more something that's correct for us. And also historically marginalized. We heard of marginalized communities that have been lack of resources, lack of schools and education and so forth, and yada, yada, yada. But I say historically because that has been done so since back in history, historically marginalized communities. And I say BIPOC is for, folks of color. And for me, I didn't learn these things until like later on. This isn't something that I just created or made up. It's out there. And now with all the civil rights movements now and so on and so forth, people are now addressing said systems, and hopefully some of these systems that they're addressing will help us with our trauma. Like, listen, I've got a lot of pushback in schools. Nah, we can't have those programs right now. Student A can't do this because he's failing. Well, student A ain't gonna pass unless they know what they're feeling. They're not accepting it. The information's not coming in there like that, right? So there's a block in the brain where one part is hyper aroused, where the other one is not. The one that's usually aroused is the amygdala. So you're aware of everything that's going on. You see it. It's like the watchtower. You're seeing these things happen. Now you use fight or flight or freeze. Those are your responses. And then what happens is it blocks your ability to articulate how you're feeling and how you say it. So in turn, they can't really address their issues. You can't really retain information if this is heightened in that way, and the other side of your brain is not working properly. That's why they prescribe medicine. But before even prescribing medicine, let's address what's going on that's causing him or her or them to do this.
I think they're quick to put kids on medicine.
Way too quick.
Heavily. Yeah.
And then the kid's sitting around like a zombie.
Right. And most of them too, like I would say sometimes, because I'm not a clinician, I can't say most, but at times they are misdiagnosed, misprescribed. And then they're taking more and more meds. And then they're like, parents like, yo, I don't see no changes because it ain't the right med. And on top of that, you're not addressing what's causing the harm in the first place.
So do you find that the children are afraid to speak up because of what the parent might say or think, or is it they're afraid to say anything because the parent says, well, if you say something, they're going to take you from me.
Both. And also, they don't want to be labeled as such. Sometimes, I don't want to be the kid with the ADHD. Like, I'm self-diagnosed in terms of ADHD. We could have a conversation right now. I see a squirrel. I look over for a squirrel. In meetings and stuff, I'm always fidgety. Dance is the only thing that kept me calm. The arts, performance, right? So they need to find ways to address it and keep them calm. So that way they can retain information and regurgitate it back onto a test. That's another issue, but I'm not even going to go there, right? So one of the things that we want to look at when I look at when I'm teaching my classes is how can we be more trauma informed, and also how can we be more culturally responsive as a community, especially with communities of color like BIPOC communities and marginalized communities, when predominantly statistically shows that most educators are white women in said neighborhoods. Now, we'll just take that right on the surface. Are they trained properly? Are they trained in a way to work with youth from said communities? Do they know the communities? Do they shop there? Do they know what to eat? Do they know this? So the cultures are different.
Right.
It's hard to teach a different culture a traditional education when it's not equitable in the first place.
So are you saying that a white teacher can't relate to a black child?
Yes and no. So I have white teachers that know this kind of work. They actually moved into said communities, and so to address your thing, it's a yes and no, because a lot of them are traditionally trained and most of them go into marginalized communities to work. Easiest place to get work.
Because if a teacher doesn't know that this kid hasn't ate, or he's stressed out, or maybe his clothes ain't right, and some kids are dressed with Jordans and this and that, and he probably don't want to be there because the other kids are clowning him. So that teacher might not know what that kid's even going through. So how can she reach that kid?
That's the thing where you have to build rapport. Like, you can't come in there and act like you're the savior or the champion of this community, of that child, or of these children, right? You have to build that rapport. It's not up to the students to build that. It's not up to them. It's up to the educator. Now, white, black, Spanish, whatever the case may be, it's up to you to build rapport with the students. It's not vice versa. You have to build their trust. So that way they can trust you and say, hey, this is things that are going on in my house, or whatever the case may be. But when I'm going back to the white educators, many of them are not from said neighborhoods. They don't know how to address the problems. What I don't want, and this is me selfishly, nobody else, what I don't want is those similar narratives saying these educators left and say, nah, I can't work with that community. The kids don't want to learn. Or they're problem children. Or they're unteachable. And just to be really fair, we have to have educators, white, black, Spanish, whatever the case may be, that are able to address said issues in a way that helps the student, and not look at them as like another problem that they could just pass on, right? Socially promoted, and so on and so forth. But because I say white educators are, that's what's prominent in the education system. Like, I don't know about y'all. I grew up and I saw a lot of white educators. And if I did see a black educator or a black person, even in higher education, they're usually support staff, a TA.
I never had a black teacher. I think I had a black music teacher.
Right.
That was it.
Right.
The most black teachers I saw was in Central, but that was the hood, so
Yeah.
they probably couldn't get any white educators to come in there. So most of the teachers that I had that were black was definitely in high school.
Yeah. And to give some credit, I'll leave the school out of it, but I did a performance and a showcase for the program that I was going to do. And this is years later. I'm talking about like 2016 or something like that, after the fact, right? So I'm giving the performance, and then 2 white educators came up to me, and I'm like, yo, they were the same educators that were here when I was in middle school. And I'm like, y'all still here? Because you didn't want to leave or nothing? And their responses warmed my heart, because they said specifically, this is where I want to be. This is the children that I know. This is where I feel like I'm needed, or if I'm not needed, this is where I feel I can have the best impact. They've been doing this since I was in middle school. I'm 42 now, and they was doing this since I was in middle school. And to see them there again with smiles on their faces and so on and so forth. That gave me some kind of like light and positivity, because we don't see that at times. And then, I can't believe I forgot. I'm not going to say her name anyway. Black teacher who was in a semester, and then in Bridgham, and then in that same school when I went back. Can I say her name? I can say her name. Miss Sheila. I don't know her last name, but Miss Sheila is a gospel singer too. And she was at one of my homeboys' dad's funeral. And
I'm sure we know her.
And I saw her there again, and I'm like, yo, Miss Sheila. That's beautiful to see that. And she's still in these education systems working with children, because she knows the youth. And she knows how to reach them the way that she can. And that you can't teach that.
Right.
Experiential kind of learning, you can't teach that.
Right.
You can teach how to build rapport and how to build trust and learn the community and go eat where they eat and observe what you're teaching. If you're serving that community, observe what you're teaching.
Right. So do any of the schools around in the Providence or Rhode Island as a state as a whole have any programs implemented where they kind of like focus on the mental health of the children?
There are some. I'm not sure where CBITS is at right now, because I haven't done that in a long time. So I moved into higher education, so I can still implement certain things in a higher education field, because that's still prevalent there too. I think there is. I don't know if there's a different name. I know there's more clinicians now, which there should be. There's more counselors, I think, 1 or 2, which is not enough. And they're so inundated with students and stories and trauma that it's hard for them to get to every single body. But it's important with these programs because, and I'll share one story. There was a student, and man, she was a badass bully. She came in. It's a 10-week program. She laughed at other people's traumas when they were sharing their stories. She didn't listen. She wasn't distracting. She wasn't like making all kinds of ruckus and noise in class. But the clinician and I was like, yo, I don't know if we could do this. It's because it's taking the energy away from the class. She's making fun of the students, and so they're not going to share their traumas. But then we're like, you know what? We needed a new strategy. We can't just give up on her. So one thing we noticed was that she was always on time or early. And then she was always the last to leave. So in creating that kind of space, we wanted to give her some autonomy of the actual program. I'm like, yo, you want to help me set up the tables? Put up some posters, and she did it, right? And she did all of these things, and she graduated the course. Now, did she graduate the course the way we wanted her to graduate the course? Nah, not at all. So in my mind, I'm like, yo, she ain't listening for nothing. Months later, I came back, and she had the biggest smile on the face that I've never seen on her before. She gave me a hug, and it was a beautiful hug. I'm not a big huggy person, but for her, absolutely. She graduated the middle school. She went from 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s to 70s, 80s, and 90s. She had better attendance in schools. She avoided 2 fights, and that was all we needed from a clinician myself. She goes, Sok, I told you. And I'm sitting there like, you're right. Because even myself, I almost lost faith.
What do you think turned her around?
So my understanding is the process was she needed more time for that to really process, right? And I kept in contact with the clinician. The clinician kept having one-on-ones with her and making sure that she's still implementing certain things that she learned. Because of the program and the clinician, that was what helped her move forward. It made her understand a few things, right? I don't know where she's at right now. But for that moment, I'll take that as a win.
And sometimes, children just need to feel that somebody cares. Somebody cares about me enough to want to see me succeed in life.
Right.
But I have to ask, did she ever share her trauma story?
Yes.
She did.
Yeah, I'm not going to share specifically what it is because of her, so on and so forth, but it's intense. And I'll share a general sense in terms of stories from youth. Again, it ranges from alcoholic parents, overdose, community violence, and these are all the said categories of trauma. You have acute, chronic, complex, and then historical factors, right, that go into it, and she had all 4. Of course, she didn't understand it because, again, like as youth, as we were, this is an everyday thing. This is what we do. This is how we survive. This is how we live. but we're not going to understand that. And it's
Mhm.
always that. Have you guys ever heard the analogy of that loaf of bread,
Yep.
where they have a loaf of bread and then they give these crumbs to the community, and then the community fights over the crumbs, and then the person that owns or the system that owns the loaf of bread gives the narrative of the community being violent and this and this. Like, what do you expect when you gave us crumbs and you have a whole ass loaf, right? Yeah, I can go on, but let me digress and whatnot and move on to some other things if you want.
Oh, well, we really wanted to get into like, children. Cause,
Yeah.
And especially now we're approaching like the holidays and
Mm-hmm.
some children are not in good positions. So they're worried, they're not going to get what other children are getting. And, they fall into depression or, and child suicide is
Right.
just, it's prevalent. Like, the hospitals are Hasbro and Bradley, these children's hospitals are overcrowded and they don't even know what to do. But I have a question for you. It's a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're if you're a parent and your child has some issues, as a parent, what steps should you take to help that child? And then if you're the child and you feel like you can't go to a parent or a close person, a loved one, what steps should the child take, or what's out there for the child to be able to go somewhere to get the help or the assistance that they need?
Okay, so the first part of the question now, I'm assuming that's a question from a parent that sees something wrong in their child or
Right.
something that's bothering
Not
them.
necessarily like the parent that has some issues of their own.
Right. But they're seeing something, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things goes back to your first question, not your first question, the question that you asked that nobody asked you if you were okay, right? We really have to ask. That's why I do check-ins in my classes. Y'all good?
Mhm.
Cool. Let me see how you're feeling. And then allow them to feel exactly what they're feeling. If they're angry, allow them to be angry. Because most times we're like, nah, don't be angry. Relax. You got this. What you mean I got this? I'm struggling, fam. Like let me know. So allow them to feel whatever they're feeling. And then ask the questions in terms of like, are you okay? What's the issue? What's the problem? And if they're not answering certain ways, then you know for sure that you have to give them extra help. And what I would do is contact the school clinician because they'll probably see something too.
Mhm.
Not the administration, even though they're dope, because I've met some really dope administrators, but more so the clinician, people that haven't worked with the child in the first place, and then get them the professional help that they need. Before even being diagnosed, looking into what was the issue, what was the trauma, having someone to talk to that they trust. And that person doesn't have to be a therapist. It can be a teacher. It could be a friend. They have to trust you to be able to open up. Then you can start the lines of communication going forward with that field. It's not an easy process.
Mhm.
You can't expect to we're going to heal this trauma overnight. No, this has been historical prior to him being born, right?
Mhm.
So when that gets passed on, they're not going to be able to understand it because they don't know exactly what it is or how to articulate what they're feeling. So these steps are what's going to go forward in terms of addressing it and see, hey, you know what? Cool. Don't know how you're doing, but let's see how you're feeling and be fair to them and let them express what they feel, and then have someone they trust, even if it's the parent. If it's not a parent, an aunt, uncle,
Mhm.
brother, sister, cousin, something like that, that'll work, and then go from there. And I believe in therapy, talk therapy, arts therapy, dance therapy, all of these things that to creatively heal yourself, and start that process young. Now,
I have
Yeah.
a question. Do the kids, do they open up and tell you their problems? Or
on the first day,
on the first day?
on the first day,
Oh, wow.
not all of them, but on the first day. So I have leeway because I'm not a clinician.
Mhm.
As an artist coming there working with clinicians, I'm able to share my story. So when they hear like, yo, you from the West End? Are you from this? Are you from that? Some of them feel bad for me. Like I should have sat down with they at. You know what I mean? So they're like, damn, Sok, you made me feel better about myself. And I'm like, damn, maybe I did. But that builds rapport. At times, therapists or clinicians legally can't share certain things, right? So I break that barrier.
And see,
Um,
I think transparency
Yeah.
is huge. Like I'm sorry if I ever had to go to a therapist or whomever. You're helping me, but the first thing I need to know, what have you gone through? Because if you haven't gone through anything, I really don't think you can help me. Don't tell me what the books say. because that's not going to help me. I need your real life story to help me get through whatever I'm going through. So if you can't share your life, I don't think you can help me. I really don't.
Right. And that's what happened to me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
So I've had 3 therapists. 2 of them were white women, and they came highly recommended. And not for nothing, they're phenomenal therapists. But they just kept agreeing and agreeing and agreeing. I'm like, what are you agreeing with? That I'm messed up, or or the things that you're saying? So I'm sure they're phenomenal therapists, but it didn't work for me. But that's the thing. You can't go on just one therapist. You have to find the one that you trust and whatever. So the 3rd therapist was a male, white man. And I was like, but I've been working with said therapists in like shows and so on and so forth. Well, you know what? We built some kind of rapport. This therapist actually broke down those barriers and shared that they were an artist, a musician. They went to their things too. They didn't go into detail, but they went through their issues too, and they had action steps in terms of addressing my traumas and see what we can do next and so on and so forth, instead of just talk therapy. And they had strategies on ways where we can address certain things in a different way to see how I try it out, and then I check in every single week and so on and so forth. That helped me. So you can't go based off of your first therapist. If they don't work, they don't work. You know, you decide who works for you, because they can go off book whatever they want. But you're not a book. You're a human being that has different experiences that they may not even know about. They've read about, but may not know about.
And that, I think that makes it tough for a child. So you go into therapy, and I can say this because at one point I had a child in my household, and she was going to therapy. She totally did not like the therapist. And she was like, because she doesn't understand, she doesn't get it. And she probably didn't. So as a child, you're going there to this therapist. At some point, you're just going to shut down and just go through the process, and you're not getting anything out of it. And as a matter of fact, it's probably making you more angry because I'm being forced to come here, and this person doesn't even understand me
Feels
at
like
all.
a waste of my time.
Yeah. So, like, you know, and I know a lot of times they unless it's family counseling or whatever, but at some point they want to speak to you individually. I don't know if some of the kids are being lost in those individual conversations because and don't give me a therapist that doesn't have children because you can't relate.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna mention Dr. Richard Booth, phenomenal individual. I've worked with him for years. I go based off some of his ideologies and his learning, and he shared his story with me, you know, from Mattapan, Dorchester area, those kinds of things. So he knows about that stuff. And he told me a story about getting pizza with a colleague, and they're both mental health specialists. And so they went to, I think, Roxbury or Dorchester area, and they went to get pizza. And drive-by happened around the corner, pop, 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 pop. The other therapist is a white therapist, but they all went down under the booth and everything, tried to duck for cover.
Are they both white?
No, Dr. Booth is black man.
Okay.
Black man, and long locks and everything like that. After the shooting happened, he came back, ordered his pizza, and was like, cool, yada, 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 as if it was an everyday thing. And the other therapist was still under the table, frightened for his life. Couple things. Who is right here? Or what in terms of their response? Is it Dr. Booth that's like, came back out above the table, ordered the pizza, go on his merry way? Or the therapist that was still under the table?
I think they both are because they're going based off of the environment that they're used to, that
right,
they're from.
Right, and that is where the issue lies. Because we are normalized to community violence, this is another day for us. The other man that was under the table, he's like, this ain't it. You know, this ain't normal.
Yeah.
It's not normal. You shouldn't have to live through bullets. You shouldn't have to, because bullets don't have names on them. They have targets, but there's no names on them, right? It'll take you. And the thing is, and I haven't met a bullet since all those drive-bys in my neighborhoods, but that's what we normalize. So let me get that pizza. Cool, we're good, right? That's another layer of trauma that we don't realize. So when you're looking at that, to get your second question, a student, they have to go to someone they trust first. Sometimes it's not a therapist. And representation is key, right? However that means to you. So if let's say a Cambodian student was like, you know what, I'm sorry, but these other therapists ain't gonna work for me because they don't look like me, or they don't know of my story, it's not gonna work,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or get another therapist of color that can understand at least similarities. So I believe that we all have our own story. We share it. I don't believe in that rhetoric of I can do it, you can do it. Don't believe in that. Okay, you did it, cool. How'd you get there? Because how many times have you heard stories where there's a sibling, right? Brother and sister. One of them made it to a college prep school and then went to, college prep school and then went to a great college, university, now getting their doctorates, while the brother ended up in the prison system. Chain link fences, marginalized community. What happened? Because we share the same story. I mean, they share the same parents. So what happened?
That kid wanted it.
Wanted
more.
What helped him get there? Right? And that's the thing. What, in terms of the other sibling, where did they go that they took a different route?
I think a lot of it has to do too, especially, well, depending on what age you are, who you surround yourself with. Do you surround yourself with like-minded people? Meaning, okay, I always taught my young men to be positive leaders, don't follow after anyone. So you have to, I think at an early age, you need to, especially when you see your child is on the right track, you want them to stay there because it's so easy to be persuaded by $500, a nice pair of sneakers.
Yeah.
Your parents are strict. They don't let you do anything. So bunk school this day and we can go do something else.
And the kid gets pressured into it.
Yeah,
he wants to fit in. So
you have to teach them to surround yourself, even as adults, with like-minded people that have aspirations and have goals and see themselves coming out of whatever. Especially because most of them are like living in the hood or not in the best areas, and so sometimes for them it's more of a struggle because you have to deal with what the hand you're given and you have no choice.
Right.
So you have to have the mind that, but I won't always be here. It's not going to always be like this. So I believe as parents, you need to start instilling that in your children at an early age. Surround yourself with like-minded people. Be a positive leader. You can be the next Barack Obama. You could be the next Michelle Obama. You can be the next Maya Angelou. You know what I'm saying? So you have to, as parents, because you have a responsibility to your children. They didn't ask to be here.
Right.
Well, I think, you can have, say you got 4 kids and you raise them all the right way and 3 are on point and one's a little to the left. I think that kid surrounds himself with the wrong people, like you were saying. And I think some kids want it more than other kids. Like some kids just, like you can raise your kid right, but once they hit that door, they're going to make their own decisions and do what they want.
Right.
So it's, like you were saying, like where'd you go wrong? I don't think a parent went wrong, or it's just people make choices and some make the wrong choices. So.
And when there's multiple children in the family, I find that one of them is going to feel like they're the outcast.
Right.
Absolutely.
They're the black sheep of the family. And it could just be all in their mind. But there's always one that's going to feel like they don't get treated like the rest of them.
Right. And, it's interesting because, different kids have different influences, different peers, and then peer pressure. You may have the one quote-unquote smarter kid. You have the one that's more of a rebel. And you have one that's more of like an in-between. And you're, as a parent, you're trying to give equal amounts of love to all of them. But what it takes is equitable amounts of love for all of them, right? So if you're seeing that one is having trouble more in school, you have to channel that energy into that other one differently, and have other kids, other children understand that child A is not doing too great in this field. So, and having that understanding, but we're not taught this when we were younger. We're not taught this in school. We're not taught this because we didn't learn this. And when we have a lack of resources, a lack of access to certain mental health things that we can't afford, and we're given public care, it's a little bit different. And then comes the stigma, and then comes the narratives of like, are you from that hood? Have you heard about that hood? Meanwhile, I'm in that hood where I'm thinking like, this is a dope ass hood. Because I didn't give the narrative of this being impoverished community, even though it is, because we live every day like it's everyday life, right? So, because nobody chose to be poor. I didn't wake up one day and be like, damn, being poor, that's dope. Let me try that one for one quick thing, right? Nobody chose to go do those things. It goes back to the crumbs, right? What piece of crumb can I get right now? And how can I turn this crumb into like muffins and bread and so forth? But when you're not given the strategies, the skills to do so, you have to look for something else.
And that's why a lot of kids turn to drugs, like selling drugs, doing drugs, selling drugs. Like you said, they're getting crumbs.
Mhm.
Right? Other people got a whole loaf of bread.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so they turn to, you know what, I'm going to do this so I can get right. You know what I mean?
Right. And then the thing is, too, like, your story follows you, right? It's from school to school, from neighborhood to neighborhood, friend to friend, or whatever the case may be. I don't know how many times you've heard, oh, that's that kid from said school. They're socially promoting them, or so on and so forth, when that kid didn't even tell their story in the first place. So no one knows, not that no one knows, but the administrations and new kids and new whatever don't know what their story is and what they've gone through. They've never made space for that, right? So when they're quote unquote failing and not doing so well as the other kids, they're now labeled as that problem child, or, you know, need extra help and all of these other things. You want to say something? I thought you were going to say something.
Do they still have No Kid Left Behind in school?
Oh, I'm not sure. I haven't been in that thing in a while.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if they still had that.
Yeah, but
Like, they
there,
pass the kid, either he's failing or not, which is crazy.
Yeah,
back then
that-
we called it social promotion.
Yeah, that helps them. How?
Not at all, because now you put him in the 7th grade and he's there struggling. Now he's going to act up, get kicked out of class because he can't do the work anyway, so he wants to get kicked out. I just thought that was foolish. No Kid Left Behind. Like, why are you going to promote the kid if he can't do the work? Like, get him
Right.
some help. Not
Yeah.
promote him. That's not helping him.
And were the teachers blamed for that? No. Well, he didn't want to, or she didn't want to, or she didn't try. Well, what did you offer to help them?
You know what their first thing is? They want to put the kid in special ed or something like that, and then the kid gets labeled, and other kids make fun of him. And, you know, I had a child that was not doing good in school, and they told me, oh, that child needs to go in special ed. I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with her. She just doesn't have a good foundation of school. So I took her to Sylvan Learning Center and got her right, because I didn't want her to go to in special ed because the kids were going to tease her.
Right.
Because I was that kid that used to tease the kids that was in special ed. You know what I mean? Kids could be cruel. You know what I mean? And be like, look, you're in special ed. And like, I didn't want that for my child. So they're quick to either put the kid on medication, put the kid in special ed, just move the kid along because they don't want to deal with it. And that's not right.
It takes a village too. You know, it takes a village. I believe in that saying to be really true. Another story is when a student came in, I was just signing in to go teach the program, and a student came in and she was just clearly upset, crying, and so on and so forth. Nobody paid her no mind. And this is where I give it up to the administration. The secretary was there giving her the hugs and so on and so forth. And she was a black woman, and she knew exactly how to treat that child. There was the hug, consoling her. We're not going to send her to class right now because she ain't ready, which was absolutely right in my opinion in terms of making sure the kid is right first emotionally and see what's going on. Called the clinician down. They called myself down, and then we did an impromptu kind of like session with her to see what was going on, what was happening. And then when she can stabilize it a little bit better, balance it off a little bit, then we can send her back into class. You know, and that was, for me, was the right way to do it for a child. Now, the question it comes in, we have 400, 500, 1,000 kids in this school. We have this limited number of teachers, this limited number of things. That's because the system didn't create these spaces to be available for the children in the first place. If they had that in mind, it would be different. But now they're trying to redo it, revamp it, re-up it, and then here comes funding, issue of funding, and an issue of this, and an issue of that. So, but you see schools being rebuilt all the time, getting fancier, looking nicer. Education still the same. You know, a plethora of charter schools coming up. Public education still the same. No shade to charter schools because my daughter was in one. I also teach in one or was in one. So no shade to them, but looking into where funding goes and how funding gets allocated, right? They really have, when it takes a village, they really have to listen to the people in the community. Have to listen to the people in the community, especially the youth,
Wow.
because they'll tell you.
They'll tell you. Well, this has been a very interesting episode. Thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all for having me.
Being a
Thanks
part
for
of this
coming.
Yeah, for sure.
podcast and agreeing to do this with us. It was very informative, educational, and I hope whoever listens to this, parents, children, that if you know there's something going on, get the help. Get the help, because at the end of the day, the child suffers a lot, and there's help out there, and we're gonna get socials.
My social?
Yeah,
Oh, my social media. Oh, you trying to get my social security? All right. I see you. I just want to give a plug out to what saved me was arts organizations. AS220, Everett Company Station School, Matt and Ab Project, community music work, so many different amazing student orgs, and also orgs like Arise, PSU, who have the children, the youth, and the student, the community in the forefront and in mind. So if you don't know of any places, search for these places.
Yeah, and those listening from other states, do the same. He listed off places in Rhode Island, but those listening in other states, do the same. There's arts programs out there, speak with your children, see what they're interested in. Save your child. Save your child.
All of them.
Yeah, save them. So with that being said, can we get your social media?
Yes, so it's easy. My name is my name. It's Sokeo, Sokeo, on my Facebook, Instagram, same thing. I don't use Twitter much, but same thing. Sokeo 401, search it, Sokeo. LinkedIn, same thing, Sokeo. There's no other Sokeo out there, I don't think. Hopefully not. TikTok. I have a TikTok, but I don't use it. I don't use it. I'm there just to scroll and troll. It's same thing, Sokeo. So all Snap, Sokeo. But the biggest one, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook.
So no dance moves on TikTok?
No, I haven't done those things. You'll see them on Instagram and Facebook. There's a plethora of things. And also if you just not to be cocky, but Google my name. You'll see it out there.
All right.
Cool.
We're going to do that.
Mr. Corey?
COJ208 on all social platforms.
You can find me at ms_Shirla on Insta. Facebook is Shirla White. Don't forget to look for us on YouTube. Let's Talk Church and Other Things. The link is on my profile on my Facebook page. And we'd love to hear from you, so please send us an email to ltc.ot@gmail.com. Until next time, peace and blessings.
Peace out, y'all.
Peace.